Here, you ready to go?
You're gonna do some business stuff first? I need 5 more men. I don't need it.
Well, I want a glowing review like you gave that other guy you're going to bring in.
Well, we're actually done, maybe we will.
Yeah, there you go. Hello, everybody. I think most of you know me. I came up with this demo a few months ago on mounting and remounting on the lathe. There are a plethora of different ways you can mount stuff on the lathe. And we're going to start with the simplest ones, the between centers, and then just move on. I'll be going kind of fast, so the old guys try and keep up. Right, Carl?
Right.
Who's the oldest one in here? Is that you, Carl? Or is that somebody else?
Probably Jim.
Oh, yeah, Jim. Forgot about Jim. Okay, let me get some glasses, find the knockout bore. Need this locked. I don't have one of these silly lathes at home anymore, so let's get this back off. Okay, when you buy a lathe new, they all come with a spur drive and a live center, which I have a whole bunch of them around here. Where'd they go? Where did all the live centers go? So, what's the other drawer? This is the most stuff I've ever brought to a demo. Even when I demonstrate at the Florida Symposium, I don't bring this much stuff. So we have a spur drive, which you pound into the wood in most cases, and then a live center with the bearing, you put pressure together and that holds them. This is the spur drive. Can we go to this camera, please? Overhead. Comes with the jet MIDI and mini lathes, which I really don't like this spur drive at all because it doesn't bite very well and usually ends up spinning. If you're doing big, medium to big stuff, this one's not effective enough. And I have quite a variety of them. So this is a 3/8 spur drive. This is a 1/2 inch. This is a little bit bigger one. That one's a little bigger, but this one has a springy point, which when you put the wood in, the point retracts. So when you have your blank, you take a punch and pop a center hole, and that tip goes in there, and then it recesses down in until the teeth engage in your wood. This type is called a Stebbs type. One of these is actually the Stebbs, and which are like 70% cheaper. And they also have the little spring point on them. So
Stebbs is a brand name?
Stebbs is a brand name.
I wonder where.
It's like Super Glue is a brand name. And there's the other ones, they call them Stebbs types because, and see, this is one where you actually put it in the chuck. And I'll demonstrate these real quick. So these are only good for small to medium type stuff because these teeth always end up spinning heavy cuts. Always. So you're continually having to tighten this and doing that. You can put a little super glue on it. This is known as a dead center. Goes into headstock, your wood goes on there, and it just puts pressure into the wood. It's real easy to stop when you're practicing learning a tool like a gouge. It's difficult to learn, or skew. That way, if you get a catch, the wood just stops right away. You don't get that big gouge going 3/4 of the way around. It's really effective, especially for learning the gouges and the skews, this type of center. And this one also has the springy point on it, and then there's a cup that grabs it. This one is just a point. This is the one that used to come with the jet lays. I hate this one, and it has a really large cup and a center point. You can actually pop out the center point, and it's over there somewhere, and just use the cup if you want. With the point in it, it holds the wood a whole lot better. Oh, it's right in the corner right there. I knew I'd have you bowing to me someday.
Don't make it happen.
So you can use it with the point in, which is if you're roughing out, you need the point. But if you're just re-chucking something, just having this circle or cup, you can reposition it even a 1/16 inch in any direction to true your piece up. That's very effective with that. And it's really good if you're remounting something else and you don't want this point in the hole. Because if you have that in there and you already have your hole in the wood, that point wants to force itself back in. If you're trying to move this over a 1/16 inch in one direction, that wants to go in. With this, it gives you the latitude to do that.
What's that one called?
Well, this is just the one that comes with the jet lays. Yeah.
If you buy a jet lathe, that's the model.
Yeah, if you buy a jet lathe, you get the smaller ones. You get this center and this center. The other ones, well, let me go back to this. This is a great big number 2 taper. I acquired this when I got somebody's shop, and I've used it as a drive spur before, and if you're cutting heavy, it can drill in there. I don't know if this was a mill because you got sharp edges all the way down. What is that? But I hardly ever use this, but I have used it to drive the wood. This is a homemade one. I had to do a bunch of cabinet pulls for a house in the Bahamas, so I made this one to go in there, and this screw is actually the screw that the knobs are going to held on. So I drilled a pilot hole, just screwed them on here, turned the knob, unscrewed it, did the next one. Worked really well.
about removing 2 of the 4 teeth or whatever you want to call them. So that if you don't have a perfectly vertical surface.
Yeah, that's this one. This is one of my favorite spur drives. I had this one for at least 20 years. It's got 2 big teeth. If you're doing a bigger chunk of wood, you want to get that on there and you want to pound it in the wood. This one holds really well, hardly ever spins it out. You were talking about the other one, grinding them off, or?
Yeah, if you have a regular piece of wood and it's not perfectly
Right.
vertical on the 2 teeth.
Right.
Yeah, so that you can't get all 4 to
Yeah, and but what he's saying, if your blanks are not cut perfectly true, like most of mine aren't, if you use center on there, and you're going to have 2 of these teeth touching, and the other 2 won't be, and then hence it starts drilling in. If you use this type, if you do it this way, 1 tooth is touching, but you can turn it so those 2 are touching equally, and then you can put it in the wood.
And it allows you to line, pound it in the terrain.
Yeah. And where'd my hammer go? And you need to get it in the wood. I use a hammer and you beat that sucker in there. If you're using your wood mallet, it's going to tear up your mallet. I've had this over 20 years, and if I have to grind this little tip, because it mushroom out once a year, you know, that's worth it. So use a hammer, get it down into your wood, that way you can keep going. If you're having a trouble with the wood spinning on the center, get your tenon on there as fast as you can, and then put it in a chuck.
You could use a brass hammer.
Yeah,
More forgiving.
that'll bend up, but it doesn't matter. You just take it on your grinder, and it takes about 12 seconds. Grind that burr off. It's flanged over. So we can pass these around so you can look at them. Some of them are sharp, so be careful. I do have Band-Aids over there on my bowl with the thorns on it, in case anybody needs a Band-Aid. Okay, now live centers. There are a lot of different ones you can do. I had my big cone one, and it should be right here, but there we go. This is the center of my preference. I like this one the best. It gets into the wood. You got this great big cone, and it goes deep in. If you're doing something like soft Norfolk or mango, it'll go in. I've had it go in a ½ inch. And so you got to figure into your piece, you got a big ½ inch hole. Usually we do the tenon when we're lining up. We have the tenon on this side, so having a hole in there from that is really not an issue. If you plan into your piece, that's going to happen. So that's the one I prefer. I use that 2-pronger a lot. The Stebbs type, if I'm doing a smaller piece, I definitely use those. Now that one that comes with the jet lathe that's going around, can you throw that one up here? The live center. Yeah, point first. I got Band-Aids over there. Now this one has a great big hole in the bottom. And if you put it in this lathe, the push out rod inside here is so small, it goes inside there. You cannot pop this out by retracting this on the Powermatic lathe. So if you take a screw and put it in the end, that eliminates that problem. Because I used to do that all the time. I needed this one for something. I put it in here, the pressure locked it in there, and you can kick this backwards, and that sucker will not come out unless you put a thing in there. I'm going to be passing a lot of stuff around, so you're my point man. Now, the one-way center or one-way type comes with a lot of the 14-inch lathes and bigger. I don't know if they do it on the 12-inch lathes. And I've had this one for over 20 years. You get this big body. You get this big cone that you can put on here. There's a rod you put in to lock it into place, and try and put the hole up, because if it's on the side, it works. This locks it so it doesn't spin. You can put this big cone center on there. I don't remember if I drilled that hole. I think they have the hole drilled, so you can get that out with your knockout bar to unscrew it, because it'll get on there tight and you can break it loose, unscrew it off. You get this great big cone and cup with it. You could screw that on either way, because there are times when you're doing something like a sphere and you need a cone center on there. You can make them out of wood too. And this one will fit in a piece with a bigger hole to center it. Like if you're putting something on, like a pepper mill, which I'll go into later, you could put that in and you have your jam chuck on this side and it chews it up to the hole you drilled through it. Okay, if you're using this one, you may have a bigger piece that you want to chew up like that. That way, this is in there, that will spin freely and allow you to do that. There's tape on here. I've put foam pads on here before and done things like that. You can, there is a point that comes with it, but I almost never have the little center point in here. If it's your only one, yeah, you want to use that point as much as you can, just because it helps hold it. And I almost never use that. And again, without the point, let's say, we have our piece and we have some kind of jam chuck, but it's out around and you need to go left, right, up and down. With just this cup, you can do it really easily. Now the club has one in the toolbox over here, and the edge of this was totally rounded over. So you can actually tape this or put a piece of wire through here and put it in your headstock and turn it and take a Dremel with a little grinding burr and sharpen that end up again. That way it grabs better. Cindy Drozda makes this little pinpoint center to go in these. She has a metal lathe and does that, and that's for doing smaller things. This one has an even finer point. She does a lot of small, delicate work, and this just puts the smallest little hole in the bottom of your piece. And I have 2 extra ones in case anybody's interested in one of those. You can see me after this thing. All right. Yes, sir.
Another use for that live center without the point in it is if you're doing spindle work and you
Yeah.
make something that comes almost to a point, it can go inside that hole.
Yeah, I was getting to that.
Okay.
Can you hand me one of those hair picks over here, please? Thank you. You want one for your hair? Yeah, what Carl brought up, you can take the end of your piece and it'll go right inside there. And it automatically trues it up. You can have this end into a jam chuck with a hole, and I could spin this piece and recut it and do other things I want to it. Then there are homemade ones. This, I forget the size, I think it's 5/8 by whatever thread, and you can get a tap and tap your own wood. I had to make a couple plastic ones. This one is concave. I use it for turning eggs or spheres because this one is concave, so you can turn it and true it up to make it as close to perfectly round. And this will screw right on. And then I have a custom made padded or softer piece. Now this center also, you can buy this adapter which goes on here. And you can screw a chuck or a faceplate on this side. Why do we need that? Well, I've done that several times over my wood turning career. There was a piece I did for the Palms Hotel down in Miami. Let me turn it sideways. These two big pillars are under their front counter, and it had to be split in half. So,
Turn your phone the other direction. It looks, there you go.
okay.
Now it's right.
Yeah, and those are 25 inches tall. That top bead is 18 inches across in diameter. So they were going to try and cut it, and I said, no, I can do it in two pieces, so you just take it apart. And I told them the blank, I want the blank this way. I want the blank 19 inches across and 8 inches tall, two of them. So I put them together, and I mounted a faceplate on both ends, a great big 8-inch faceplate across the joint, and I put in lots of deep screws. The top and the bottom didn't matter if there were screw holes. I had to take a chainsaw and a plane and whittle the corners down to fit on the Powermatic I used to have. And then I turned it, but I also had the two blocks, and I knew the profile, so I epoxied all these corners, which were going to be totally cleaned off. I epoxied the two big blanks together. Had to use my hoist to get that thing up on my lathe. It was heavy. And then I turned half of it, wrapped stretch wrap around it, which I did also on the other half. When I started, I took saran wrap or stretch film and wrapped it around it, a lot of layers. And then I turned half, and then I wrapped that half with the stretch wrap, and then turned the other half. And I was able to do it that way. This was a sample to show how to do that. I got two 2x4s together. They're the same this way, so they're square. I put this faceplate, which you can put on a chuck, and there would be another faceplate on this side. Turn your piece, take the faceplates off, and you take it apart, and you got two halves. Now, you can put blocks of wood on there and turn tenons on them and do the same thing. Center in a tenon, and then take it apart. But I did that, and I took a piece of pine and put it on there, but I put it this way with the grain going across, the same as the same. And it lasted about 30 seconds before it blew apart, hit me, and I had 7 stitches right here. So, exactly. Why wasn't I wearing a shield? If I would have turned the wood or used better wood, when I put it back together, I used plywood on the ends, and that worked. So, because sometimes you need a split turning, and that was for a big credenza that this company was making, and they needed the two halves to go on in the two different sides. So, and they were going to cut it in half with the saw, and I said, no, I'll do a split turning, and that can do that. So this would be there, and we would take your chuck. This has a little dovetail recess in there, and you put it on your chuck and open it up, and it grabs this type of faceplate ring. Recess in there, and you put it on your chuck and open it up, and it grabs this type of faceplate ring. How many people have seen that one before? 2, 3, yeah. It's not very common. So that was one of the jobs I did. Okay. Let's get this off of here. And if anybody has the one-way and wants to borrow this instead of spending like 65 bucks to buy it, just let me know and I'll let you borrow it. So I haven't used it in probably 5 years at least. But I may need it tomorrow.
So you're saying whoever borrows it from you can hang on to it?
For 5 years. 5 more years. Or until tomorrow, yeah.
One comment, real quickly.
Yes, sir.
On that revolving center, on the tailstock, make sure that whatever you put in there, like the 2 people take spur drive.
Oh, yeah,
There,
yeah,
on the up, and you get this god or wood smell in about 10
Yeah.
seconds.
wow. What is that one? It's a heck of a spur drive with just a big straight shank on there. Anybody know what that one's for? Yeah, so your drive centers only go in the headstock, the ones with the spur. This is a cup center, which can go in this side. And if you're using the stationary cup centers, you need to take some wax. I have a candle here somewhere. You need to take some wax. I have a candle here somewhere. And pretend this is a candle. You need to take some wax and wax that end up on both sides, and that will lubricate it, because on this side, one side will be spinning against the wood. So when it does that, the wax lubricates it and it doesn't burn it as bad. It will be smoking, and that's the way they originally started doing it. They didn't figure out spur drives and bearings and that way back in whatever days. So I've had people do that a lot too. They put the spur drive over here and turn it on. It's crazy. How much time I got, Bill? Oh, another hour and a half at least. Okay. And you have face plates. Most lathes come with a face plate. They come in all sizes. This one's aluminum. This one is aluminum also, but it's a 3-inch, and that's whatever that is, 2-inch, 1.5 inches. And it depends on the size of your piece or your application. Like this was a glue block. This piece of wood, this walnut, was glued to this cherry, which is glued and possibly screwed to this piece of plywood. The wood you put on the face plate needs to be good wood if you're using it for a glue block. You don't want a really nasty piece of soft pine or MDF. The good quality MDF will work, but some of the other stuff will come apart if you got too big a piece and you're doing too much pressure on it. Face plates can be used for jam chucks. This is a plywood disc which goes on here, and we can use this for reverse chucking. Where's
Just a press fit, or you put screws to that?
just a press fit. Well, you can put screws to it too. Say I'm ready to take the bottom off this bowl. I have my center mark. I can run that up, turn the lathe on. I can come in and cut the bottom the way I want to cut it.
What's that fabric?
This is just some foam pad for wood floor underlayment. There's always leftover scraps of that around, and you can find them. But this foam pad offers some grip. You don't want to do wood against wood. you can put a piece of paper in between there, but this does allow me to chuck up a piece like this. You can also if you know the size, I just put this on here yesterday, make different size circles. So when you're remounting a piece, you can kind of guesstimate. See, I can look at the circle, and if it's the same space there and here, then I can bring this up and put it on the piece and get it pretty much center. And that's one benefit about this cup without that. It doesn't really leave too much of a mark. I can put a pad on there. Should be in here. Here. If you take a little piece of leather and put that on there, I have little rounds of really thin wood. You can even use that with the pointy live center on there. If you're rechucking a finished piece, you can do that. No saping, Bill. So, now there's also ways to do this. Let's say, I'm going to cut the bottom off of this later, but we're mounting up this piece and the bottom is off and we want to remount this. You can take this type of faceplate. I didn't take time to make one. You need to turn a ring of plywood, some nice thick stuff, not ½ inch, and that can fit over it, especially if you're redoing a hole or something you want to do here. And then you drill through here and here, and you run threaded rod down, at least 4. And that can screw this down, and that way your opening here is accessible to you. I did that years ago and haven't used it since. Let's say you have a piece like this or whatever over, it'll be riding on here and it'll hold your piece down. But any way you mount the wood, you need to use the tailstock with the center as much as possible, because that is your safety support. If you don't use that, stuff goes flying. And we can do that.
Use it with the ring and all thread, right?
Yeah, the ring and all thread.
But you wouldn't use the tail.
It depends what you're doing. If you're just mounting that some way to do something on the side, yeah, I would put a center in there. If you're doing something to the opening, you can't do that, but that ring allows you access to the top of your piece. Let's say I decided I wanted this hole bigger. So I could do that, have a jam chuck or something that the base fits into. This one, I mean, without the tenon, this one still has a tenon, so you just put that in. And you could have that big ring. I mean, we're talking bigger pieces too. This one, you might be able to get away with it in the chuck just to open that. Say you wanted to make this opening 1/4 inch bigger. That way it's accessible to you. And this demo is just about mounting and remounting in different ways. So I will be doing a little bit of turning. This might even get back on here. So now you can mount pieces on the lathe without using the center. You can do this, make a quick tenon on it, do some decorating. I do that all the time. But you have to make sure your tailstock is clinched up tight, and you keep checking it, because if you hear any wobbling or any movement, you get it tight again. So let's say I was going to do this piece. I want to get the center in the hole, tweak it against that. Now I could go ahead and turn this piece lightly. See, that loosened up a little bit already. This is making that a little looser. Another thing I do, this is a diamond lap disc. It's 1200 grit diamond, it's for polishing stones. So if I'm using those little carbide cutters, I can put this right here against there, turn it on. That sucker is running perfectly true. I also do that right against the jaws. I can put that or a piece of wood right against there, do that, turn a quick tenon. But say the little carbide cutters, I will double side tape that thing to my finger, put a drop of soap here, get a little soap on it, turn this on, just run it back and forth. Sharpens the top of that little square carbide cutter on your hollowing tools really fast and easy. Yeah, you can also do it like that, but if I'm doing a bunch of them, if I've been saving them up and want to do them all at once, I'll just do that real quick. The guy on the internet doing it, he used oil, but oil is a big freaking mess. If you use soap, you can just rinse it right off and clean it up. Oh, I thought you said Lee. Okay. How could you not be? Okay, so let's move on to chucks. Chucks come in all different sizes and shapes. This is a great big one. It's a Vicmark. This is like the most expensive chuck you can buy. It's also probably, Vicmark is probably the best brand in the world quality-wise. It's very, very good. This thing is big and heavy. If you're doing bigger pieces, you need a bigger chuck with bigger jaws. This is the biggest chuck jaws I have, and I use that. I can put a great big tenon on there, about 5/8 an inch deep if I'm doing a great big piece. And this one's made by One Way. This is a scroll chuck. It's controlled. This is a scroll chuck. It's controlled, open and close with 2 Tommy bars, or 1 if you have a lock on your lathe, you can open and close it. This little apprentice chuck from Craft Supply has a square tip, opens and closes with a wrench. This is the One Way one, and the Nova chucks have a keyed T-wrench that goes in, and you open and close it that way. The Vicmark has a big Allen wrench, so if you lose this, you can go to the hardware store and buy the appropriate Allen wrench that fits in there to open and close it. They come with all different kind of jaws. You got your regular straight jaw with teeth inside. This Vicmark is dovetailed, meaning it slants inward on the inside and outward on the outside. Oh, so let's say where's this one? This bowl was done with a tenon or a recess on the inside that's slightly dovetailed. That goes in here. Come on. I know you lock. We can lock that, put our bowl there, open it up on the inside. And we need to lock it on there. Oop, wasn't in far enough. And okay, you can hollow out your bowl. Now, doing a recessed tenon like this is never as strong as a tenon that goes inside and the chuck is squeezing it. That holds better than this, because see, you can knock this off. If that was twice as deep, it would be better. And the recess you need to cut needs to match the angle of this jaw for it to be most effective. You really don't want to use a chuck on the inside with straight jaws. This one and the one way, there's like two teeth on the outside, and they grab and kind of dig in under the edge. So you can do that with those, but they don't hold as good as the dovetail jaw. And some people do a tenon on the outside edge. See, like this bowl has a tenon out there. You could put that in here and squeeze it down. I'm not going to tighten that up because I don't want marks on this. And that can hold it, but the chucks always leave tool marks. So you need to figure that in, that, hey, I'm going to cut this a little smaller, get rid of those tool marks, or like Mickey does, leave them on there for decorations. So, right, Mickey?
Cindy says,
Yeah, design opportunity. So whatever jaw you're using, you need to cut your tenon to match that jaw. This jaw is dovetailed, and you can see it angles up this way and out that way. So the tenon we make on the outside needs to have that angle. This is the one-way jaw. It's straight, and there's a whole lot of teeth in here. So your tenon on your piece of wood needs to be absolutely straight. So this can grab on to the wood there. This surface needs to be on top of the jaw. This surface rarely touches the bottom. You don't want it in touching the bottom and nothing on top of the jaw, because that's not as strong. If you want 100% holding power, you need to make sure you're resting on top here and not touching the bottom, and cut accurately towards the inside. So this is the tenon for the straight chuck. And this surface needs to be absolutely parallel or slightly undercut. You don't want it angled that way. Otherwise, it's just touching here in the corner. If you're angling it back, this outer edge is sitting on top of your jaw, and that's where you get the strength from. If you make it perfectly 90 degrees, that's great. It'll work too. Now, some jaws, if you're doing a bigger, longer hollow vessel, there's shark jaws. They are some big, long jaws, about 3 inches long, and you can do a really big, long tenon. So this was done in some shark jaws. The tenon is almost 1 inch long, so you need that kind of strength to hold the bigger, deeper pieces. Now, if I'm doing a bigger piece and I've knocked it loose, not out of the chuck, but just loose so it wobbles at least once, I will actually CA glue the jaws right to my piece of wood. I've been doing it for over 20 years. Doesn't hurt your jaws. That one's not sticking over, but I would take the glue and just run a bead right up against the wood. And then on all 4 jaws, hit it with the accelerator. And then that sucker's not going to get knocked loose again until I'm done with my turning. And then all I have to do is pop this loose. 3 jaws will break loose and 1 will stay there. And you just pop it off like that.
But you glue all 4 jaws.
I glue all 4 jaws.
But you have to remove some of the residue.
Remove some of the residue
Off the
Yeah,
jaws.
I mean, you got some of the CA glue is still on
on the chuck
the jaw.
or here. Well, I'm going into that right now.
Okay.
Because I've been doing this for over 20 years. It works really well. Oh, got it too high. I need to lube this up. All you do is turn the lathe on, crank the speed up, take the left edge of your parting tool, cleans it right off. You can do it on the end, the side too. Now there's no glue on there. It's just that quick and that easy. Jaws are perfectly true and clean. I mean, you could soak them in acetone, do that if you want, but and that easy. Jaws are perfectly true and clean. I mean, you could soak them in acetone, do that if you want, but it really makes a difference in your holding power. Now, should I pass all these chucks around? Now, this little chuck, I have 2 of them. This one I use, and this set of jaws goes down to about a 1/4 inch. So that's really good. Plus, I can drill a hole with like a 7/8 or a 1 inch Forstner bit and stick it in over the chuck and expand the chuck out, and that can hold my piece too.
How many chucks do you have?
Oh, at least 10. Whenever I'm selling a lathe or something, oh, does a chuck come with it? No. Can't have my chuck. Okay, so this chuck I use for mostly small things. So let's say I'm at a demonstration and I snapped a lead on my pencil. I can stick my pencil in like this all the way and just go ahead and sharpen it really quick with a gouge. So I do have a pencil sharpener in my bin though. Now, how do you get the chucks off when they're stuck on there? So I've had people call and say, I can't get the chuck off the lathe. They try it with the wrench and that works sometimes. If you have a lock, that's helpful. I like to open the jaws up a little bit and I take the knockout bar and go in like that. That pops it loose. Real easy. If you got a bigger chuck, you may want to get your 5/8 bowl gouge. Stick it in there all the way up against here. Bang, give it a pop, it comes right off. Okay. This should go in that box. Got a lot to get, folks. Trying to get through it fast. Now, face plates, where's my 2x4s? Let's do those in here. It's good to have your center mark. So when you get a face plate, one this size usually has 4 holes. You should drill 4 more holes in there and take a bigger drill bit or a what? Countersinker, and cone this out on both sides. Because when you put a faceplate and drive a screw in, what happens when you drive a screw into wood? There's always this little ring of wood which lifts out. It will lift your faceplate off. If you cone it out on the underside, that little wood lifting up will go up inside there, and your faceplate will be perfectly flat on your wood. It holds it better. If you're doing it between centers and then decide you want to put a faceplate on it, if you could actually turn a recess that fits in and it's perfectly centered and true already. So let's do this one. You want to use number 12 or 14 screws at the minimum. Do not use drywall screws. They break, and you'll have a broken screw in your wood. I mean, you're putting them in and you can snap the heads right off. Just the pressure and the vibrations, I've had them break. So if you're doing a side grain piece like this, if we were mounting it on the side and your screws are going in on the side grain, you can get away with the screw going a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch into the wood. If you're doing a faceplate on the end grain, you need to double that. You need like 1.5 inches going into the wood for it to hold, especially if you got softer wood. If it's real strong, like the rosewood, you can get away with a little less. But screws going into the end grain do not hold as well. So
Can you clarify the point you made that you said that the plate has 4 holes, you should drill 4 more? What's
Yeah.
the point of that?
well, it gives you more holding power. If you only have 4 holes and you got a big chunk and you're trying to hollow it out,
You want a screw in every hole.
you want a lot of screws holding that. Like that great big thing I did, it had to weigh 120 pounds or more. That was solid maple. And I had those 2 things. I put in bolts and stuff in those. So, and I had on each side because I wanted it to hold strong.
Do you use the real strong screws like Nepcons?
No, just machine sheet metal screws that you get from the Home Depot. The ones with cone-shaped heads, they'll fit down in there and true this right up. If you use the round cap heads and your hole is bigger, your faceplate can have a little play in it. So this type of head, whether you cone that out or not, is best to hold it in place, the most solid, especially if you're doing bigger pieces. Whoops. So now this piece, I'm just going to use drywall screws just because we're not turning it. Yeah, that's right. Well, these will just strip the wood out. See, that just stripped out the hole. But now if I was going to do a double split turning like this side would be over here on a chuck, and this one would be screwed onto the live center. I could do my turning. I probably would take some saran wrap and wrap several layers around half of it, turn half, take that off and do the other half. If it's just this small, you could put a hose clamp on here. You could just use masking tape, stuff like that. That will work nicely.
When you put a faceplate on both ends?
both ends.
Don't you have to make sure they're really,
Yeah, I did that.
centered? Yeah.
Yeah, because the blank was square. So I did the center finder on both ends. I've got one here somewhere. You have to find the center on both ends. Made sure the blank was absolutely square to start with. That way you can do it pretty accurately. Now, let's say we wanted to mount this back on the lathe and clean it up. How do we do it? Well, again, there's many ways. I could position it on here, run some screws through the back. Plus, it depends on the application of this. This was a cut-off piece. Like, if I got a nice burl piece of wood, I'm going to go in with a parting tool and take this ring off. I can put this on the top of a vase. I can make a mirror out of it. I can make a rim. I can make a base to something. That's a nice piece of burl wood, so I cut that off. So if I take a faceplate like this, I can glue it on. I can screw it on from the back. And this is another type of chuck. This is cold jaws, which you buy separately and attach them to your chuck. They come like that, a set of 4. You can even get an attachment which goes on here and makes them bigger. This isn't the right one for this jaw, but it's for the next size up. There's a size for the 10-inch lathe. This size is for the 12-inch lathe. And then you got some great big ones. And then you can even add this on to do like a 15, 16-inch piece. Now, I can adjust those buttons so this piece fits inside. Where did I put the other one? I could get this inside here. And tighten this down. I need to loosen it, push that in, and tighten it down.
So the jaws on that aluminum piece are moving?
Yeah, this opens and closes.
Okay.
So I can go ahead and come in and turn this part of it, and then I can adjust the buttons and put them on the inside. I can mount it this way to do the bottom and there, but then I can put the buttons on the inside and expand it out and cut the outside. Now, whenever you're using this type of jaw, you should use the tailstock as much as you possibly can, because things fly away. Like my buddy Larry was doing this rosewood box about that big, and he put them in here thinking that would hold and didn't put the tailstock, and he just touched it with a tool, and it went shooting across the room, hit the wall. So cold jaws come with these little bitty buttons. This one is kind of dovetailed out, which would be good if we're holding a piece like this. It'll be underneath the edge. So if we're reverse chucking something to cut the bottom off, you can get this in here like that. And this one is just kind of straight. Doesn't hold as well as that one. For the stuff I do, I wanted taller ones. So I made these out of some synthetic wine corks. I had to buy longer screws, and they're firm but flexible, and they work really well. So, well, yeah. Back in the day. You can go to a bar and they have wine corks and just say, save me a bunch, and they will. So, whereas the smaller button wouldn't really hold that, since the fat part of the bowl is right here, these taller buttons will grab it up here on the edge where it's necessary. And that would be in here. You'd have your tailstock up. You could finish your bottom, put a foot, cut down in here. And then when you're just barely done, you'd take the center away just to do the little bit in the center. I believe there was a piece here I was going to do that too. And going through all the stuff, getting ready, I found these set of pins that go on here. They're padded. That's a solid aluminum tube that goes down here. And it has the great big screw that's fat, and then it's tapered down to screw into here. And these are solid. They're padded. I've never used them, but I plan on doing that. And I don't know where that set came from, but they're really nice. But these wine corks, they work excellent. They're inexpensive. If anybody wants some, I have them already drilled out. How did I drill these? I took this chuck, opened it up, stuck the wine cork in there, the drill bit over here, perfectly straight centered hole. And these are rake. Now, if you just want some wine corks, you could take some, but I've got the screws, but these cost $1.25 each. So if you want the wine corks with screws, see me later. If you want to go buy your own screws, that's fine. I got washers to go with them too. So, or you could go drink your 8 bottles of wine and. But they are very effective on this type of jaw. I did have a piece that could go in there. Yeah, I think it was this one.
What kind of drill do you use to drill a hole?
Just the regular brad point bit. They just drill out like nothing. I actually just pushed the tailstock in and took it right back out. You're out of the way. So I have this piece. If I put it this way, the fat part is up here, so that won't really work. That really tall button, that one will work on this if I was doing top. I would not hollow this out in those jaws. I'm going to make a hollow form out of this piece of wood. The opening will be here, the size of a quarter. Hollow this out to like a 1/4 inch. But doing the bottom, I could put it in this way. This jaw is a little, or chuck is a little tight. You need to hold it tight, push it up. This centers it. See, now that's pretty true. As long as you have the center on here, it's safe. So I would come in and cut the bottom, the top off that was on there, and do whatever I want, decorate it, sand it. And then for the last little 1/4 inch, you could take this apart. And if I'm suspect with anything with this, I would take the saran wrap and wrap it all the way around, just leaving the little center bit that I want to work on open. Or you could tape it on there. So, there, we could pass this around. Bill? Yes, sir.
The saran wrap, I think they sell sell in moving stores,
Yeah,
so stuff that's on a handle.
yeah. I have a great big roll that long, and the little ones you can buy have the handle on them, and that's really good for going around on pieces like this. Yeah, Office Depot has them. Yeah. That's what, yeah. Yeah,
The thing is, the saran wrap is infinitely cheap.
yeah, it is. So you could just take that tube and cut it on your bandsaw and mount it on the lathe and cut it with your skew. It's always a way. Small chuck. Now this chuck came in here. This is that set of jaws with all the paint wore off. You get 4 different sets of jaws with this. See, there's a large jaw, which I don't know what you'll call that, 3-inch jaw. This jaw will grab 1 inch, so I could take a dowel rod. I did bring a 1-inch dowel. So much stuff. You could take a 1-inch dowel and stick it in here and grab it. It comes with that 1/4 inch, which was tapered out just a little bit. So I put it on the lathe and took a 1/4 inch drill and drilled it straight out. So it would have a straight surface, and it works so much better. You also get this step jaw where you have a couple different steps, and you could take a toothpick and put it inside here and grab that. You want to do minuscule work, like glue a rice grain on a toothpick.
Can you move it just towards you a little bit? We've got a band on this TV that is.
Is that better? How about right here?
There you go.
So you could put a toothpick inside here. Or again, you can drill a hole in a piece of wood and put it over the top of this step or this step. I had another one where there are 4 different steps that you could put on there. And this is the Apprentice chuck sold at Craft Supply. This is the mini one. They have a bigger one, the same size as the one-way Talon. That is about $165 now.
Yeah, probably. When I bought mine, they were like $150.
I paid $143 for those. And but everything, the price of everything is going up. Now you can also, on a chuck, let's do this one, make your own jaws for it. Like Bonnie Klein does a lot of threading. She's got a threading jig that she uses. Yeah. When you're doing a threaded piece, the diameter of your threaded one, is that the right spot? The diameter of your threaded piece, the piece you screw it into is the jam chuck for one, but then you got to make a jam chuck for the other side. So you got to make a threaded piece to screw that on to cut the bottom off. So she made a set of jaws out of plastic that fit. She cut wedges, drilled the holes, screwed them to the jaws, turned it the profile she wanted, then she closed it, threaded the inside. And whatever size of threaded tenon she has, she can just stick it in there and close the jaws on it, and it holds it in place, whether it was this big or that big. So that I've been planning on doing that for 10 years, but I haven't yet. So maybe tomorrow. And I was going to turn some camphor today, Bruce, but I was thinking of you.
Gee, thanks.
So I didn't bring it.
The rest of the room thanks you too.
And I was going to turn some camphor today, Bruce, but I was thinking of you.
Gee, thanks.
So I didn't bring it.
The rest of the room thanks you too.
Yeah. Now, if you do a lot of bowls, you can turn great big step jaws where the steps are on the inside. Step in, step in, step in. As many as you want. I've seen like 8 of them, different sizes. So For your jam chuck, you could just open that chuck up, stick it in, and those steps in here, you could get on the right one and just grab your piece, put your center on, cut the bottom off your bowl. If you're doing a lot of that kind of piece, you can do all different sizes, but you got to take the time, cut your wedges, drill the holes in the right place, screw it here, close it, turn your shapes, and you can make your own step jaws. There's many, many, many different ways to do things. Well, now, Hans Weisflog does this spider box where the lid of the box, you cut concentric beads like that all across the inside of the bottom of the lid, and then you offset the top and you cut the rings, but the center, the center is now over here instead of dead center, and then you cut it down just enough where you can see through it. So this is a jig to do that. Goes in the chuck. You need to have a dowel hole drilled and a little recess cut so you can pop it off. And this piece goes on like that. You want it snug. And then you apply, and that offsets your piece. And then when you're done turning, you could stick something in and just pop it, and that CA glue will break off. And I think he did this side first and then turned it around and just put it in a jam chuck and then cut all the rings on the inside. And that's just another way you can hold things off. If you want to do some pendants and do some offset grooves in it, you can do it this way. There are other chucks specifically made for that. There's ones with drill holes and all different patterns, and you can move them around. This is a eccentric chuck. E-C-C-E-N-T-R-I-C. Yeah. And this is the adapter for it, which I just found. So I didn't think I had an adapter. So this screws on. This is 3/4 16. So it's the old Sears lathe or the Carbotech, or you need an adapter. So you put your piece in here. And you screw this on. My fingers don't work as well as they used to 40 years ago.
Just wait.
Just wait? What, because you're 5 years older than me? Just wait? You still only look about 52. And that goes in, you tighten the set screw, but you can reposition this. That can be on dead center, and your blank is mounted on here somehow. I don't know how you do that. This one has a little faceplate thing. There's also a screw center you can put in. That way I can put it over here, and my piece can be on dead center, or I can move it over here. Like, let's say I wanted to cut different rings on it. Or I was working on some pieces where I had a vase coming up, and I had 3 or 5 different spires coming up. So this would put it off center, so I could turn one spire down. It's kind of like that, right here. And then turn it and do another one here, and turn it and do another one here. And this piece is going around like this. It's pretty crazy, but that's an eccentric chuck. And there are different varieties of them. There's even a chuck system you can get so you can make oval things. Like I've seen them where they do oval picture frames, but you can make oval vases and bowls too.
So if you did an oval bowl, would it just be 2 setups? Like half and half?
No, the chuck actually goes around like that.
Or would you only do 2 setups though to get an oval?
No, you one. You just mount it on the chuck, and the chuck is you're cutting in the same spot. Your tool's not jumping around, but your piece is going around, and it cuts the actual oval into it. Go on YouTube and punch in oval wood turning, and you'll see some videos on that. Okay, I'm gonna put you in here. Okay, let's say, where'd the other chuck go? Looking for the chuck with the number 2 jaw. There we go. Let's say I got this beautiful piece of wood and I don't want to put a hole in the center. I use the Stebbs type. There's a tiny hole in the little ring. I want to hollow this out. So I'm going to take a glue block, put it in the chuck here. And whenever you're putting something in the chuck, don't hold it on the side, because 90% of the time you're going to hold it a little bit crooked and it's going to wobble. You want to put pressure here. If you have the center and you can put your center in, that's even better. Also, if you plan on taking your piece out of the chuck and putting it back in, all these jaws, or most of them, are numbered. This is number 1. I will just do a mark along the number 1 jaw. I do just like a little T and I put a little X there. This comes out, it goes back in this chuck in that exact same spot. That way it's going to be true. Any other position, most likely you'll have some wobble to it. So I want to glue this onto here. This will be my glue block. It's just a leftover piece I had. So I took a profile gauge and I got right on center, went down, I made the profile of it, and then I cut the face of the profile. That way this inch of material, when I glue this on, will be holding it right there. This is soft porous wood, so I sprayed 1 coat of lacquer on here so the glue wouldn't really go inside there. Now, the glue of choice would be like Titebond or epoxy. CA glue will work if you have a perfect match. So I have a very good match there. It's okay if I get glue on a club lathe? Yeah, you got me a new club shirt, right? This is a Florida Wood Turning Symposium, 2020, where I was a demonstrator. Whoop. Hope they don't mind glue on their floor. And I want to give this a little spray. I have my center mark up here. I'm going to get it close. Quickly position it, give it a little spin. A little more juice here.
You only glued 1 surface?
Well, I glued one and I sprayed the accelerator on the other surface. because I put a lot of glue on the one side, and that will hold that in place. So always step aside when you do something like that, because the glue, if you see it spritz out, I usually have the tool rest there. If I see little speckles hitting that, it's not ready yet. Now, my buddy Larry, I was turning at a different lathe, but I could see him, and I looked up, and he just glued a bunch of cracks and stuff on this piece. And he did this, standing right, he went, and and I just went for him and grabbed him. I said, keep blinking. And I dragged him in the bathroom, and I had eye wash and just hosed him out. And he was fine. His eye was a little red. That you get CA glue in your eye, go see the eye doctor. One of the guys in the Broward Club used to be, he's an eye doctor, and he says nail technicians use CA glue all the time, and they get it in their eye, then they grab it and yank it and tear the cornea. He said, just leave it, come see us, we'll take care of it. So, see, that's running almost perfectly true. I would clean up the outside, drill my hole, and then go ahead and hop this out. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but on this piece, which you don't normally do, there's a big hole here. Why did I do that? Because I want to cut this off, and I've only got that inch ring around there, so I know it's here somewhere. Well, I have a live center, which is smaller. So when I reverse chuck this, the live center will go all the way through there and touch the bottom of my piece. I have a Stebbs type live center with the bearing in it. So it's going to match those holes exactly without putting a deeper hole in the bottom. I can go ahead and cut this off, and when it pops loose, I shut the lathe off, remove this, put that back, and I can complete the bottom. That just gives me another option of saving this nice piece of curly, burly, spalted wood.
And what do you have on the opposite end?
Well, I'm going to have a hole about this size. I will make a wood jam chuck that this fits over, or a Kirsten cone, which I'll go into next. Because the cleanup crew thought they were going to get away without cleaning up today, so we will do that. Okay, they call it something else now, but the guy who invented this is calls it a Kelton cone or something. The guy who invented it, his daughter was named Kirsten, so he named it after her. They sell one in the Craft Supply magazine, but you can very easily make one yourself. Where's my knockout? And it is ideal for reverse chucking and cutting the bottom off of your pieces. This is basically it. This one has a number 2 taper. I don't know what this thing is called, but they use them on metal lathes a lot. They come in all different size holes. Carl, you were an engineer. What's this called?
Electrical. No, it's a collet.
Well, it's not really a collet. You just stick a rod in and tighten the thing. You can use a collet chuck too. Or this rod, which you can buy at Home Depot, it's just a 1/2-inch rod. You can put it right into Jacob's chuck. You can make one of these really easy yourself, put it right into Jacob's chuck. You just need a collar, a cone, which you're going to make, and an end piece that's got a pad on it. So this goes over our piece. Now your pressure This goes through your hole against the bottom. You bring your tailstock up in the original hole that you made. This slides down into the opening. And you want to spin this against that. That trues it up a little bit more. You push this down, your collar, you slide it down and tighten it. This doesn't need a lot of pressure. It's just to keep the top from wobbling like that. Your support is in between these 2 points right here. That's where your support is. But this prevents it from wobbling. So even a piece like this, we can do that on. Need a bigger cone here, which I brought a piece of wood. I could cut a cone that fits that. So this is one variety. This is a little different variety. Somebody turned this on a metal lathe, a number 2 taper on a threaded rod. I just made this piece, but they made this end also. How much time we got left, Bill? Another hour? Yeah, I got an hour's worth too. So this goes in. You have your cone piece on that you make up here, and you can make these any size. I've got, see, this is a bigger one. So that would go on there. See, I have some padding on here that will hold this side. Put my center on there. Go down in and cut this off. This piece, I'm not going to have a foot on it at all. I'm cutting this so it's just totally round and floating. So that would support this piece. So let's say we're doing this one.
What do you have on the end for traction?
This one has a piece of leather. And some of them I just have some foam. That's a piece of that Pergo foam padding. Yeah, even sandpaper. That's why I was looking for the sanding disc I brought. Should be here somewhere. I know I brought it. Yeah. Well, it's just a sanding mandrel that you put in the drill with the round discs. This is made so you can stick one of those in here and just tighten down the set screw. And you have the 1 inch or 2 inch sanding mandrel on the bottom, and put a piece of sandpaper on there, stick that in. But if you don't have all these fancy things, Allen wrenches, I know I brought them. Eighth inch. So we just push that down. You don't need a whole lot of pressure. It's just to keep it from going that way. Turn the lathe on. Now I can go ahead and sand the outside of this piece. Or just go ahead and cut the bottom. Prevent the chips from getting in my pants. Take a bowl gouge. This is an end grain turning. And again, you have to make sure you have the pressure up. Now, one thing I did not do is check my depth. how deep is it hollowed inside before I attempt to cut the bottom off. Okay, so we're way up here. We got plenty of room. See, and it's real easy to take that off, put it back on. Just snug it a little, turn it against it. My leg pull on it too. My leg pull on it too. So our bottom is way up here. So wherever I cut that off is fine. You can see this is running perfectly true. Spindle gouge. This is the Mike Mahoney spindle gouge, bowl gouge. Works really well. So I'm going to just round this over. Now I'm going to leave this bit on here so I can sand this piece later at home, because there's, I need to sand this bit. That's pretty good, and kind of blend it in a little. But usually when I'm doing a piece, if you're cutting this and you make it too small, how many people have did a little cone here and had that thing split in half and break and your piece go all over? There's an easy way to eliminate that. You turn a little or cone there. And you use your put a point in there. Put a point in there. And that fits right over that. That will not break. Side grain or end grain. Still running perfectly true. If it's long enough, I could get right in here. I could cut that little nub down to 1/8 inch and then chisel it off and then grind a little bit down. That will not break and have your piece wobbling all over. Let's say you only did a jam chuck. You cut a little tenon that fits perfectly in there, so you have no support in the center. If that breaks, this thing can come off and go flying around. Like somebody at my studio did that yesterday, making this big oak bowl wet. He wanted it so it would warp out, and he shot it off the lathe twice when it was done. Didn't damage it. So that's how this works. Now, if you're making your own, you just go to Home Depot, buy your 1/2 inch rod, unless you got some. You can use 3/4. See, I have a short one I mostly use, and I have this big long one. And I have a bunch of these collars over here extra. If anybody wants one, I brought about a dozen of them. You can use this. I saw in the catalog, they have an actual faceplate on there with a set screw and an Allen wrench. So you're just pushing this big faceplate up against your cone. And it's just a little easier, but an Allen wrench will reach that really good. If you got a great big one, I mean, I've got one that's about like that for doing a great big hollow vessel. And I use these quite often. So you can pass this one around. Go get you your exercise, Bill. I'm that boring? So we got 11 o'clock. And I used to make those head pieces really big, but then I'm doing a vessel with a smaller hole, so I had to make a new one. But the small ones hold just as good as the big end piece. You don't need a really huge one. Does need to be good wood. Like this is a nice piece of maple. So that's strong stuff. You don't want to use like wood from a 2x4. So it's not very strong when you're doing that. And it's also good if you're hollowing, you got a little bitty bump right in the center. And otherwise that would be sitting kind of on that point. And if you cone it down, it brings out a little more contact on the surface, so it holds better. Yeah, I didn't make one for this one, but I was going to. These are called centering bits or spotting bits. They use them a lot in metal. They're called metal. They're really strong. You can't keep drilling. You have to keep them all the time, but they do not flex or bend. And they come in all different sizes. They're really good for starting a true pilot hole. And this one had double ends. I took one off because it doesn't fit into Jacob's chucks quite right, if that was on there. When drilling, you want to go about 800 or 1200 RPMs. And if it's a softer wood like this piece of walnut, you can push it in and pull it out. Push it in and pull it out. But you can't do a very deep hole because the flutes clog up really quick. And then they get real hot, so don't touch them. Just want
You
to,
have one of those specialty bits, you can just use a spur bit.
yeah, you can use a Forstner bit. I just want to do a deeper hole before I go with this larger bit. And when you're drilling, whether you're just cranking it in or out, grab this underhanded, not like that. You can get a good grip on it. And when you're pulling it back out like this or the whole thing, pull with this hand too. Because if this comes loose in here and starts spinning, do not take it all the way out. Crank it back in and it'll stop spinning and then you can get it out. And you can't do that on rosewood. You have to crank it in and crank it out. It's just too stout. This is a 3/4 inch drill bit with the Jacobs chucks. You can use almost any kind of drill bits.
You want to go all the way through that. So
Yeah, all the way through. And I like to pull it out, the whole tailstock, because
you're cranking it out, it'll start squealing and screaming really loud. If you're doing a pepper mill and drill in the long, deep hole, you should only do 5 turns and then clear it out. If you keep going like that, or if your blank is wet, it's going to clog it up and grab it. There's been more than once I come into my wood turning studio and there's a pepper mill blank on the lathe with a Forstner bit stuck in it. It's just there. It's not in this anymore because it came out and is deep inside that somebody cranked it too many times. So, yeah, Cindy, I'll get right on it. Now her voice don't go that high.
Want this back in here?
Yes, sir. Let's throw this one in there too. See, now that just punched through. Another thing, when you're making tenons to go in your chuck hole. So if it's not going all the way in, that may be the issue. You're closing the chuck, but it's just grabbing this thing and not here. And if you touch it to the wood without tailstock, your piece is going to go flying. Don't ask me how I know that. Okay, now this hole's all the way through, so wrong chuck key. Most of the time you drill a hole like that, it tracks off center, so we need to remount it between centers. So if we're doing a pepper mill, there it is. If we're doing a pepper mill and we just bored that 1 1/16 hole all the way through, you're drilling from this end. This end is not going to be in the center of your blank. So don't make it too small till you drill the holes. And then you have to make a chuck that fits over that, and then take your live center and put it in like that. See, this is just coned, so that may run pretty true. It's wobbling a little. But then you go back and you recut the hole outside. And with this style of lid where you got a seam, it's not that important. That's absolutely true. But if you do one, like the pepper mill I have over there, which is pretty much the top is the same size as the bottom, that has to be absolutely spot on both sides. Otherwise, your lid's going to be going around like that a little. You'll turn it and you'll feel a seam, and you'll turn it, nothing's there, and then you turn it. So you need to do that. Same thing with this piece. I need to make a jam fit here. And this piece is basically just a tool, so I can do a little cone shaped. Ideally, when you're doing jam chucks, like say we're doing one for this bowl, you make a tenon, a shallow one that goes inside the bowl, but you need a flat spot that this surface sits against too. You don't want it moving this way, but you need it supported there. You don't want to just take a thin piece and put it on a tapered rim like that, because you put too much pressure, you can break this. Don't ask Mickey how he knows that. But this is nice and thick, and it's basically going to be a tool that gets banged around and beat up. So now we're true. Not going to do it this way. The outside will be true to the center hole, and since it's going to fit right here, It needs to be true to that center hole.
So you pretty much make a jam nut specifically for the project you're working on, like you had that bowl, and then you got to do a flat ring, you just modify that particular jam nut,
Jam chuck.
Chuck?
Yeah, I have, well, for this one size will do a whole lot of different ones. But if I'm just doing a jam chuck for a piece,
You said you have a flat spot where the pressure's on the end.
yeah, well, I'll do one for this one right here. I usually take the calipers, I can see I'm right about there. Well, let's finish this because it'll just take a second.
So you don't hesitate to modify.
So now this piece can go in the bottom, and this cone will fit this size, and I don't think it'll fit this one. Yeah, I could even put this one on that if it was long enough. So this would be inside there.
Is there concern that you could over tighten out where it would spread that space?
Oh, this part?
that cone?
If you cranked a wrench on it, yeah, I wouldn't do that. That just needs enough pressure to center it and hold it into place. So now this would go into my bottom like that. These don't even need to be on here, right there. So that would be inside here, and this would go down. So I was just being lazy, didn't take those out of the way. And then we just would cinch this all the way down, and that would hold our piece in place like that. Does anybody want to see this one passed around? Nope.
So it doesn't, the end of that all thread does not have to be tapered to go into.
This one does. Somebody put this one on a metal lathe and they tapered this down and made a number 2 taper to go inside the headstock. You can have it straight, and if you got a big enough Jacobs chuck, this one only does 1/2 inch. You can get these great big ones that are about like that'll take a 3/4 rod. Or you could use a 1/2 inch threaded rod and put it right in your Jacobs chuck. I got somebody's shop and they had this in there, and we go, hey, that's pretty cool. So if I was doing a jam chuck for this piece to do just like we did before, I like doing, especially if it's thinner, like if this was an 1/8 inch wall all the way down, I'd rather use the cone on it than doing a jam chuck. Way too much.
Is that a jam chuck, what you're working?
Yeah, this is just a leftover piece of wood or a piece that I made a jam chuck out of, which I can profile it anywhere I want to fit a piece. Okay, now almost. That's just a little too tight. So when you're doing a jam chuck, like these corners here and here, if they're touching any piece of your finished wood, they will make a mark. So it's best to round those over. This one I know is just going to be touching on top here. But this surface needs to fit snug on that surface, and this surface needs to be resting on that surface. That way it can't move around, but it's supported here also. And you want to take a paper towel, or if it's real snug, a piece of toilet paper. You can use 1-ply or 2-ply. Like this, I would go ahead and cut a hole in it. So I always got to carry a knife. And give it just a little pad. Because if you're cutting too heavy and this spins against that, it will burn a ring about 3 black rings that. It will burn a ring about 3 black ring about 3/4 of the way around. Not the whole way. Never does. 3/4 of the way, and that's it. If you put a piece of paper in between there, that won't happen. See, now I can go ahead, that's running perfectly true. That's the way I do a lot of my pieces. But if I'm doing vases like this, I use that cone. But this would be perfectly acceptable, and sometimes I just didn't want to go to the file cabinet, open the drawer, and get that out. And I'll just throw a piece of wood in here. You can do this with about anything we turn. Anything we make can be remounted onto the lathe. There's always a way to do that. Wrong one. Get you out of here. Okay, Jacob's chuck.
The difference between that jam nut though and the pinches it against your,
Yeah, that support is between the bottom inside and your tailstock, your live center. And the other one is just up here. It's just up here supporting.
so you have to determine on the design of the piece whether you need that extra support or not.
Well, not the design so much, but the thickness of the wall. If you're using Norfolk Island pine and you have a less than 1/4 inch, it's really weak wood, and you put a little too much pressure here, you will break it. So this wood, this is mango, and it's about 1/4 inch. Yeah, I would do this or the other one, either way. But it depends on your wood. Rosewood, it don't matter. That stuff's strong. You can have it 1/8 inch, and that'll work. But softer, the mahogany that grows here is fine, cherry, all that kind of stuff. Like the soft walnut, that's soft like the mango. So if it's less than 1/4 inch wall, or any portion of it is less, like you may have 1/4 inch there and an 1/8 inch right here, and too much pressure, you can break that spot. I know, because I've been there and done it. Where's my Norfolk? We're going to move on to this.
You got 30 seconds.
It's only 11:15. Where do I keep putting that wrench? Okay, sometimes if you're doing a deep piece and you need a longer quill, you can get these attachments, which gives you another 4 inches in length, or 5 even, because it goes in that far, if you want this out on either side. There's a wedge that you have to pound in here to pop out your number 2 taper. Like if you're drilling a hole and you don't have a drill extension, you can put that in there like that. See, the slot is for knocking that out. 2, 3. See, this one I marked for the number 1 jaw. Just line that up, snug it a little. I have the little cone shape on the end for the other center. Where did my one-way center go? I'm gonna put that on here. See what we got. It's pretty good. Now, let's say it's even a longer piece than this. Little wax. That's a lot better. This backwards lathe. So let's say I need some more support for this one. I've only got a chuck this size with that 10 in, so the outside is pretty much done. I need a steady rest. So this is one I made. You can buy them. They're quite expensive. My old boss had this little table with a piece of glass, and the spindles here broke. And I measured it and I went, wow, that's perfect height for a 20-inch lathe. So, come on. Turn sideways. That's not good enough. I'll flip this over. And one of my buddies used to make wood turning tools, and he had one he made, which I really liked. He had 3-inch angle iron like this, and he makes the outrigger boring bars that's shaped like a Y. And it goes that way and up and this way, and there's nothing over here, just so you got room to get that outrigger on the side. Tools. There we go. Okay. I'm just going to snug this up real quick with that. Now, I just snug these nuts up first. The wheels go against the bed and they spin. That might need a new bearing in that one. Who's never seen a steady rest before? Who's never used one before? Okay. There's my hammer. Well, there's a bunch of different varieties. I like to get these wheels there. tap them in a little bit, and then tighten it some more. So now this piece is supported, and then tighten it some more. So now this piece is supported. So I can put pretty much as much pressure as I want to on here. When you line up the wheels, they should pretty much be on a flat spot. Like if I was doing it on here, I would want them down here or at the fattest part. If you do it here where it slants, I've had this actually, the force of the slant pull the piece out of the chuck. It just kind of stops right here, but it's a little scary because the piece moves over and comes right out of the chuck and the lathe is still spinning. But you can, I would already have the hole drilled most likely, and if I was howling and I was getting too much vibration or I knocked it loose in the chuck, I'd put it back in the chuck, center it, glue it to the chuck. I would center it, glue it to the chuck. I would run a bead of glue around all those jaws. If you don't get it in the gears, it's fine. But this allows me to do anything I want with it. So another steady rest. Anybody have any questions on this? If anybody wants to borrow this for your big lathe, you can use it on a 16-inch lathe also. Let me know. Bruce has one, right? You have one, right? Yeah.
I make one out of plywood.
Yeah, you can make them out of wood. I've seen them total round like this out of wood, and I've seen them, and you want to put at least 3 layers of 3/4-inch plywood. The good stuff, you know, almost cabinet grade, because it's very good and strong. Don't use particle board. You can pick up a set of roller blades at a yard sale for $5.
Bars that hold that.
Oh, no, they're out of plywood too. I've seen them like that. You can make all that out of wood. You can cut a long slot in the wood and just have one bolt with one of these wrenches on there. It's real easy to do it that way. I didn't have the means to cut a long slot, so I did it that way. Okay, I got 14 more things to show you. Okay, I just want to go, well, we got a vacuum chuck too. And unfortunately, the rod I have, this has a bearing in this end. This is a commercially produced one. This end goes on that side. And then you hook up the hose to a vacuum chuck or vacuum pump. There's a little box you can buy so you can use an air compressor. You hook that up to it and it blows air in there and it spins the turbine, which creates a vacuum, and it'll suck air out of there. Vacuum chuck. Oh, I found the other piece. This is the little sanding disc, which fits here in the end. But if you don't have one of those or one you want to commit to it, you just make one like that. It don't even have to fit super tight. So the vacuum chuck is a piece that screws onto your headstock, which is sealed fairly well. You can even put a big O-ring in there. You need a pad up here on the top. This one's made out of PVC and some kind of resin and a nut. The problem with this is most spindles have a big flat spot. So you need this recess in here with no teeth for this to screw all the way up tight. And you can put spacers on there and screw it up against that. It works really well. But the end of this piece would be inside here on the end of your spindle, and it's sucking a vacuum in here. But before you do that, you take your bowl or whatever, and you place it on there, bring your center up, twist it against it to true it up a little, and turn your vacuum on, and it'll pull up like 25 pounds of vacuum or 28. And you could take the tailstock away and you can pull on it. You'll move the lathe before you can pull that thing off. And you can come and cut the bottom. Like if the wood was from here to here that you had to cut off, I would say leave this on there till you get way down to the end, and then take it away, and then this is just free spinning, and you can cut it, you can sand it and do everything. Now, if you have a very porous wood, like you're doing in-grain Norfolk, and the bottom is a 1/4 inch thick, it will actually suck air right through the wood, or it'll suck the bottom out of your piece. If your walls are too thin and you apply that vacuum, it'll go boom, and your piece will just implode into it. I just got this thing working yesterday. I had all the parts and never messed with it. Pain in the Herb. Herb Williams died, and his wife gave me all his stuff, and this was there. Okay, we're going to do one more thing, and then that's it. We got time? Sure? Okay. Well, we still got to do instant gallery and put all this crap away.
That's your stuff.
Okay. Okay, where's my center? Where's my center? Where's my center? Okay, let's say I'm doing a spindle, and the spindle needs to remain square, and then this is decorative down here. But it's a long, skinny one, or doing like a cane. This sucker will be vibrating like crazy. So you need a steady rest support in the center. So want to damage the end of my wood. I determined this was the squarer end, so I can take a piece of this veneer and break that off. What are you bringing out the good stuff now? Because I've done a lot of turning jobs like this, and I thought, how can I hold that? Because they didn't give me any extra wood to put chuck marks on. And if you're doing something long like that, if you can get one end of it in a chuck instead of just between centers, it doesn't vibrate near as much. What's that? So this can go right in the chuck.
So just putting tape on the end wouldn't work.
You could, but you need about 6 layers before the chucks do not make a mark on it. Because they will, you'll have teeth marks. That's why when we're jam chucking something, like let's say you do a box and you want to put this over your chuck and expand it, you'll have teeth marks inside here. Or say the tenon on your lid, you want to just put that in the chuck and grab it and do the top of your box. You will have marks from those teeth. You can take a big heavy rubber band and put it over your chuck jaws and do that. Or, see, this wouldn't matter because that's going to go in there. So that can go over it, and chuck marks in here don't make any difference. But if that can go over it and chuck marks in here don't make any difference. But if it's a nicely finished piece, like you could even do that on this peppermill, because chuck marks in there or even in here aren't that important. But other things, it is. So when I'm doing something long like this, let's say they wanted 4 inches a square, and then it comes down in, and a nice thing, and a bead, and this long centered taper part, and a thing down here. Setting it up, I shield. So this is soft pine or fir. Oh, wrong way. I just didn't want to cut where those knots are. It'll go quicker. While this is still square and I have strength, I will do a spot like this. Still not all the way around though. And this is a one-way spindle steady. And this is a one-way spindle steady. Just want to snug this up first. And you want your wheels pretty much lined up. And I like to have this loose and then turn the lathe on and then crank it down. And then I tighten that bolt. And I go ahead and tighten this all the way tight. And now I will turn it on and loosen it, re-snug it. And then once that's on, I will go ahead and complete this end of it. Like on this cane, I did that. I had it in the chuck on this end, and I did it over about right here, not in the center, because that did this part. And then I moved this over to here, and then you got to actually take this off, slide that over, put it back on. But I'll move it over to, this is my start, and then I move it over to here once this is done, and then I do all the rest. And then I take it off and do all the sanding. So this is really effective. When I bought this, it was $93, and now they're like $130. But they have different wheels. It's a harder wheel with 2 big black O-rings on there. But you blow a bearing or blow a wheel, you can stick rollerblade wheels on here. So hot glue, you can use hot glue to glue 2 pieces together. You can do the old thing where they have a face plate, like back in junior high, the teacher did that. He put that there, then glued another block on, turned the bowl, a chisel, and pop. Right. I've never done that. There's a really neat thing, it's not in there. Kenny Reza, who sells the CBN wheel on your headstock. You can put the grinding wheel on there. It's true, and a hole that can go on there. Your leg can become a grinder. Where is it? Here somewhere. Okay, and like, let's say you want to mount this, just the way it is. Just turn a shaft. So I would find the center I want. This would be mounted on the lathe. I would put the center up where I'm going to turn my bowl. Put some pads across here, leaving the opening in the center. I did that great big one. Did I bring that in here last month? It's a big thing like this, and all we did was cup it out and take chain and screw the chains down across like this. Plus, you need to put wood blocks on the sides to hold this in place while you turn your bowl out of here. That way, the whole thing can be there with your bowl in the top.
So you're not putting any penetration in that.
No, yeah, because I didn't want any screws. You can put screws and then glue a piece of bark over it, but this other piece didn't warrant doing that. It was just so cool. And I have this big burl cap I bought at the Florida Symposium in Orlando in 2003. And just a couple of years ago, I decided what I'm going to do with it. And I'm going to mount it like this and turn like 5 bowls overlapping into each other. So I have to mount it in different ways to turn these bowls inside. So they will be chained on, because I don't want screw holes in the back, chains and blocks. And because I've got a great big one of these, it's 19 3/4 inches. So I can put chains on there with pads under the chains, and I'll even have to do some counterweights, which I have to screw to this. Because the weight's way over here, so I have to put a weight over here just to balance it some. But there's many, many, many ways to do stuff. This is the rubber Chucky set, and they've got a couple in there, and you screw these different heads on. See, like this is the Peppermill one. It's made to fit all these different sizes, and you just put that on there in the center end, and then you could chew that up. For the crush grind, that's for the standard one. You've got flat spot cones, and like you can use this as a jam chuck for a bowl, put your center on it, or cones. It's just a, if anybody wants to look at this after we're done here, we can do that, because I think we got to wrap it up. And there's a big mandrel which screws on your headstock, so you can put buffing wheels. There's a long one which goes.
What about a screw truck?
I didn't go with that. Yeah, screw chucks. This is one that screws on your lathe. You take your block of wood and drill a hole in the back, and then you screw it on, and you can go ahead and turn your whole bowl that way. There's this type, which goes in the center of your chuck jaws. You have to open it up, put it in, so the center bit here is grabbing right there, and these flats are on the center. You can actually use your chucks without the jaws. Take them off. If you had a dowel or something, you could put in there and just close that down on it like that. I've done that before. So you don't even need jaws on your chuck. See, this is at least a half inch, a little more, that surface, and that'll grab and hold it really well. See, and this is a bottle stopper jig. You can thread the hole or not. This goes on there. There's ones you can just stick in your Jacobs chuck, screw your bottle stopper blank on there and turn the whole thing. There's just all kinds of stuff. All right, that's it.
Great demonstration, Lee. Is there gonna be a quiz next month?
Yeah.
Clean up.
And,
We've had a business meeting, we're gonna do the, show and tell, bring back and raffle.
And I have a couple of printouts, which could be more elaborate, but he's going to email it out to everybody. But if anybody wants a paper, I got a couple of them here.
I got a quick question.
Yes, sir.